folks. Welcome to another edition of the Omnist Hour. Let's turn this down a little bit. It's going to turn out to be maybe a little lighter than the partial recording that I started of this episode. So let me start by a couple of caveats. You'll notice the music is a little brighter than normal, a nice rendition of one of the Brandenburgs. And no YouTube content scanners. It is a public domain version, which I got from a public domain source. If you try to block or get in the way of this message, like you did some others, I am going to fight it. If I can ever find the funds to do it, and at least I'm going to complain. I haven't had a ruling on my other copyright claim, but I'm getting sick of this bullshit. Corporations do not own art. The creators own it. Corporations have contracts with the artists. If the artist is dead, that contract is null and void. You don't get to maintain it somehow by staying in touch with their descendants and persuading them to do something to renew it. You fucking assholes. Sorry. Unpaid political message. At any rate, today's subject is an interesting thing that I hope some of you have also noticed about Jesus. And his famous last words, "My God, why hast thou forsaken me?" Now, I don't know if you ever noticed this about the Bible, but that's maybe the only place that he refers to his God as anything but Father. His Father. Or sometimes our Father. Now, isn't that interesting? I'm going to tell you what's behind that and what's behind many prophets of Christ-like motivation who sometimes take a turn down the wrong avenue. And so this kind of ties into yesterday's, what was it the day before? Anyway, my last podcast, which talked about demonic possession and said that it wasn't exactly what you thought it was. It could actually be a possession by some sort of ecstasy that makes you think you know everything and you want to share your good with everybody, whatever it is, or it may fill you full of hatred and want you to wipe out enemies because you know that's the only way you can bring good to our species. And those are both forms of possession that can overtake very well-meaning people when their desires to do good are picked up on by the great detectors of energy that Borg's agents are and reported to their superiors, and then you may be assigned a demon to start whispering in your ear and replace the voices that you've been following up till then, which I will tell you, your truest voice is your own higher self if you can contact it. This is something true from some of the New Age spirituality. However, if you're not careful, that voice of your higher self can be tapped in on, wiretapped, and imitated so well that you don't know whether it's real or Memorex. And you may be thinking you're talking to yourself or to your favorite deity, Jesus, God, Allah, Mother Mary, you name it, cosmic source, the Pleiadians, when you're actually talking to, the switchboard of Satan, basically. And you're not going to really know the difference unless you've reached a level where you can discern that. And that, I promise you, is a spiritual level that very, very few humans have gotten to. no matter how enlightened they think they are by their initial spiritual experiences. And, I'm not going to go on about the cosmic oneness thing or the problems with monotheism. Well, I'm going to talk about monotheism because we're talking about Jesus, so you can't really avoid it. Okay, so why would Jesus on the cross go from, Father, get me out of this fix, to, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? I would argue that this is due to a loss of faith induced by the events that happened, which was not what Jesus was expecting when he came to Jerusalem. He was expecting that suddenly people would just flock to him, which they did, and even, the enemies would bow down and say, "Oh no, this is the Messiah." And that's how many a would-be Messiah falls down the last trap of their temptation. And the story of Jesus' 3 nights in hell while he was, quote, rising, is a true one, but not for the reason you think it is. Because this ties into something you need to understand is a very real phenomenon, the near-death experience. People can have near-death experiences where they seem to be for all intents and purposes, dead, in a coma from which everybody is sure they will never recover or never be a functioning human being again. And this can go on for 3 days. I guess maybe even longer, when the person seems to come back to life and all of a sudden have new things to tell, new experiences to share. And sometimes this means that they've gone to heaven and have been offered the ability to go back by forces of the real God, and sometimes it means that they have been replaced by a doppelganger that has a mission from the dark ones. And this is the truth. Not all NDEs are wonderful things, even if they seem so to you and set you on a mission of healing, teaching, preaching, whatever. What you may be focused on after that may not be your own passion, but something that is implanted in you by somebody controlling your mind. And really only you'll know the difference if you're really in touch with your higher self, and your higher self hasn't been assimilated by Borg. And this is what happens in the spiritual realm. When you give your soul to Borg, it's not like you go sign a contract with Satan that is honored. You don't even know you're signing a contract. You're shown a bunch of a fake bill of goods and just tempted to run towards it. And if you get sucked into it, well, game over. You chose that. This is how life in communist countries work. They don't really persecute anybody. They don't get in the way of them pursuing whatever, but they use it against them when it suits them. And this is how evil works. It can masquerade as good. Masquerade as, oh, we're giving you all this free stuff. We don't care what you do with it. Oh, the law says this. We're not going to really enforce that. And then, 2 months later, after you've got your little business set up, if you're a minority especially, Uyghur, Tibetan, Mongolian, anything but Han Chinese, they'll schedule a raid and forget to tell you, and your store will disappear, all your goods will be confiscated, and even if you're lucky, you'll be deported from the city you've made your living in and sent back to your home province with strike on your record that says you can't come back to Shanghai or Beijing. This is how their hukou system works. The whole country is a prison system. And that's the truth that you'll find out if you ever live in a truly authoritarian country. All these dummies who are saying open borders is the solution are the ones wanting to enforce localized borders that they have more control over. Look at the deep blue states like New York and California. They're starting to put borders around groups of people in their state and fully prepared to put them in re-education camps like they do in China. If you don't believe me, you just sit back and do nothing and watch it happen. These people who want authoritarianism, who want to control everything, who want to tell you what to think, when to think, and how to think it, or else are servants of the evil one, even if they're Christians, even if they're Republicans, even if they're Democrats. It doesn't matter what category you fall in. They are serving the dark one. Okay, so what happened with Jesus was what happens with every soul that challenges themselves to a Messiah life. And as I've told you, there's big messiahs and there's little messiahs. The incarnations of new souls are little messiahs. Maybe they just want to challenge themselves to have a healthy marriage and a good family for the first time in any life they've ever led as a human. Maybe they want to challenge themselves to see if they can live on their own, not get caught up in a relationship, focus on their passion. And that's going to be a big challenge because you're still going to want all those other things. Maybe they've been used to coming as a man and they want to try out being a woman for a change. That's a choice you can make. And it's going to be very challenging. Anyway, so what did Jesus, who was Jesus anyway? If there was a historical Jesus, which there's still a lot of doubt on, if you really study the subject, you'll find there's more evidence for a lot of kind of Jesus-like people who felt like they had a calling to be a Messiah, had some idea of what that meant, and tried to live and preach it. John the Baptist was one of them who thought, gee, the best way to bring this all about is to raise a community of people that live by the real God and go out and then start preaching that to the ones who are completely off the rails. And, maybe we'll conquer by stealth before anybody realizes that we're really trying to change things here. Others were very militant messiahs who wanted to, the Bible says I've got to go stir up trouble and I'm going to conquer, so I've got to get me an army around me and start conquering and killing Romans and things like that. And this is what it is to have a Messiah life. And there's many ways you can go off the rails, because ultimately the deceiver, the evil God, the anti-God that pretends he's God, wants you to self-sabotage. And anyone who's struggled with their personal issues knows what self-sabotage is. You lose faith in yourself and you start thinking, well, you know what? I'm not going to be able to make it work ever. I know something's going good in my life, but I'm just sure something's going to go wrong with it. And this is a soul that has given up hope. And when you give up hope, this is one of the big things that will attract the evil to you, the evil one. Form in your mind and send a spiritual guide that leads you out of the darkness. Starts telling you what to do in your life and how to do it. That's not how the servants of the real God work. They do work with you, they do work with souls, but they give only the slightest touch of inspiration, usually in the middle of the night when you never even know it. You'll wake up from a dreamy sleep or something, or even a dreamless sleep. And all of a sudden, the idea that you've been struggling to find a solution for is in your brain. Just ask any scientist who's had a really major breakthrough. if that's not true. Any musician who's created a truly great composition, they'll start writing a song and get stuck or something, or be trying to formulate a new theory or the idea for a new kind of chip, and struggle with it for weeks, and then have this one night where, bang, you wake up and you just know what the solution is. And sometimes you can't stay awake long enough to remember it, and you just hate yourself for not remembering it. And you spend maybe the rest of your life trying to come up with that same idea and drive yourself crazy. Okay, so let's get back to the focus on Jesus and who the Christs were. I think I've kind of explained that there are many ways you can be a Messiah. But let's talk about the great Messiahs, the capital M Messiahs, who are allowed to be the Messiahs of God. You know why? Because they are actual incarnations of God. How does that happen? Well, God doesn't incarnate like most souls. Unlike most souls, even Borg, the male demiurge, the female demiurge, they are all limited within the system of reincarnation and karma to work within the limits of DNA, which means that to effect the changes they want, they have to form alliances. They have to form bloodlines. And the truth about these bloodlines is that they are limited. The male bloodlines are limited to 12 generations. After that, the magic is off, and they may still have power and influence, but that bloodline will not be one that could possibly generate the real Messiah, which is why a lot of them still exist. They still believe that somehow they're going to produce the real Messiah that's going to save humanity and rule the world with, for 1,000 years with this perfect new golden age. And there are both male and female lines coming together thinking they're going to do that. That's how these big marriages between the global elite happen. That's why Bill and Hillary are still together, even though they hate each other's guts. They think Chelsea and her offspring have a chance at being messiahs. The real messiahs. No, they're at best going to be false messiahs or lesser messiahs of things like art or literature or whatever. Okay, but these people are really confused. They don't know what's going on, they don't know the full story, and their minds are at least partly controlled by Borg, by Satan. Okay, so let me tell you about some of the other incarnations of God. One of which I can tell you was very, very real, and is the most suppressed story in human history. Listen up, this is going to be a big one. I'm going to start with telling you about symbolism in Christianity. Now, you remember the first big story of the victory of Christianity is the one about Constantine and the cross. You've heard that one, haven't you? You know who Constantine was? The Roman emperor that made Christianity the official religion of the empire, and set us on a road to the rather dystopian activities of the Catholic Church. Not all dystopian. Like anything, it's got its godly element and its satanic element, which is why we shouldn't attack anything lest we become as bad as they are, as you saw during the Reformation, when Protestants became just as bad as the Catholic Church. You think the Inquisition is bad, you should have seen some of the atrocities that they conducted in the 30 Years' War. Okay, so the actual sign in which Constantine conquered, which was put on his coins, in fact, to commemorate that victory and to show the people around the empire, who had a large variety of different Christian beliefs. He wanted to show the real Christians that he knew the secret sign, which was not the sign of the fish, which you might want to go watch the fish slapping episode of Monty Python. It's really funny, and will give you some good ideas for comically debating dogmatic Christians who think Christian hate and righteous wrath is the solution to all their problems. Okay. No, this symbol of Christianity was not a simple cross, not the Orthodox cross, not the Teutonic Knight cross, not the swastika, which was another symbol that has a lot of meaning, and people still put a lot of faith in, but doesn't mean what you think it is, and has some pretty dark connotations since Nazi times. No, the sign that was put on his soldiers' banners to carry, painted on at the last minute, was a Christogram. What that is a monogram of the letters Chi Rho. Chi Rho. Now, think about Cairo. Cairo is now the capital of Egypt. It's also surprisingly like the name Chiron, which any of you who study mythology know is the name of a centaur who came and taught humanity all sorts of things, kind of like a Jesus figure. Supposedly half man, half horse, but centaur means 10 bull. 10-fingered bull, get it? A mixture of another version of humanity and the bull people. And if you know anything about literal readings of the Bible and other ancient writings of other religions, you will know that there is a lot of therianthropic reference, that the older gods were kind of these weird hybrids of animals and humans. This is the truth. And genetically it's true, and we're going to find it soon when they keep looking at DNA evidence of ancient remains, that humanity was not evolved by gradual mutations. Yes, that is part of what happens with evolution, but it's not the whole story. Humanity was the result of active creation, either by physical beings who knew a lot about manipulating DNA, or spiritual beings who knew how to do it with spiritual energy, both of which are things that you can do to change your DNA. And And that is becoming known, again, by many in this world who are trying to profiteer from one or the other. Okay, this is why folks are out doing gain-of-function research on viruses. This is why people with latent spiritual abilities are experimenting with using those energies to change their own DNA. You'll find people that absolutely believe in that and are firmly convinced that their efforts have been making their bodies, physically better, without any understanding of their soul or how that might be affected by them mucking with what they were given. Okay, so this I want the happier music again. I'm sorry. This cat Chiron. What I'm going to tell you is that he was a member of a species that still existed on Earth, coexisted with mankind, the mankind of that version, which wasn't quite the final version we have now. Okay, that species had developed as another hybridization experiment on this very planet, and had been a previous one that developed a civilization, who actually were one of the ones that used early humans as slave labor. I think they treated them mostly pretty well, but, you know, like somebody you don't really appreciate and, you know, you're nice to, you feed them. This is how good slavery, and there is good slavery, if you take care of a mentally ill person and have them sweep the floors for you in return for food. That's a form of, I guess you'd call it slavery, but it actually is good slavery. If you weren't taking care of that person, they'd be out on the street, and if you didn't give them a sense of value in giving them some work to do that they could do, they would come to feel more worthless. And this is why pure welfare, giving somebody something for nothing, is such a bad idea and has created a lot of the problems we're trying to solve right now. We have people who have lost their self-respect, who think they're entitled to stuff just because they, or even their ancestors, were oppressed 400 thousands of years ago, which is a complete lie because our DNA is so mixed up, nobody knows what they are until they take a DNA test. And then they go and do that and they say, oh, well, my ancestors were raped. That's why I've got this Caucasian blood. Oh, God, give me a break. Yes, in some cases. But you can't honestly tell me that in an age that didn't have date rape drugs and people slept communally because they didn't have McMansions in suburbs, that somebody couldn't scream if they were being raped. This is insane. And if you were screaming and anyone in hearing distance didn't like the sound of that, how many people like the sound of a baby crying and can resist going and seeing what's wrong with the baby? Not that many of these things were rape. They were consensual, just as most sex is. It's an exchange. And call it prostitution, call it marriage, call it convenience, if you will. As we've seen with this whole Amber Heard, Johnny Depp thing, this is the reality of relationships. They start when two people want something from each other enough to put up with each other and have sex, even if they don't enjoy it, and can end up in them hating each other and trying to sue the pants off each other. I don't care who you think is right in that. That's exactly what's going on there. And it's sick. It's disgusting. It's like watching, worldwide wrestling with narcissists instead of boxers or wrestlers. That's what it looks like to me, and that's what it should look like to you. It's sick, and it's disgusting, and it's pitiful, and it's pathetic. Okay, back to the subject. This Chiron guy was a real entity, was half male, half human, half horse, and had an interesting story. He had been on the, quote, favorite world of these centaurs, Centauri, the one that produced the species that sent out colonists to go mix with these humans who were a nearby solar system and seemed to have some things they wanted, especially had these wonderful fingers and things that if we could get some of those, we could do a lot more with our hooves. And we wouldn't have to use these robots that somebody gave us to do all our work, which are starting to annoy us and doing things that we really don't like and sort of controlling us instead of us controlling them like they said they would when they came and offered their services to us. Chiron was the last of the centaurs that made it to Centauri. And were trying to free their parent species, the bull gods, from Borg, who, like every planet, starts invading you by pretending to give you good stuff for free and ends up by controlling your mind and turning you against each other. Sound familiar? So this last centaur knew, so close to Earth, he didn't go straight to Earth. What he did was take his rocket ship or whatever means of transportation they had, and he went to the Elohim world because he knew that they were one of the species that was still holding out against Borg. He went to them and said, "Hey, I know that these five-fingered hominids on this Earth planet near us were your creation, and I think they're going to be next. What do you think?" Somebody needs to go warn them and help them from being wiped out like we were. And the Elohim said, yeah, but we can't go there anymore because the last time we did, they turned a bunch of us against each other and conquered us, and we're still fighting that battle internally. We don't know how many spies we have here, and God, we hope you're not talking to the wrong people here, because somebody may just kill you before you get going. So what we advise is this: we're going to give you the true story behind creation that we've been preserving in our minds, because we've still got telepathy and we've still got access to our memories. The version of karma we got didn't have amnesia, and that was the downfall of our species. We remembered so much that we thought we were better than these humans we were creating, and thought they would always be a slave species, not realizing that they were created absolutely because they would forget, that their species needed to forget, needed to lose all their spiritual powers, or most of them, except for a few, throwbacks who have latent abilities. Because with all of this power and capability, you get lazy. You don't invent new stuff. And that's not how we're going to defeat Borg. Because if you already know everything, anything new you invent, they'll worm into somebody's mind, because you're all sharing it, and they'll steal it and use it against you. And that's what's been happening all along in this story, is the good guys invent something and the bad guys steal it. Sound familiar? Now you should have a better idea why Chinese, the Communist Party, not the Chinese people, the Communist Party are not your best friends. Actually, a lot of Chinese are that way too. They are so materialistic and focused on making money that they will cheat anybody as long as it's not their close family or closest associates. That is part of Chinese culture. It's not very pretty. Actually, it's part of a lot of Asian cultures. It's one of the good things that the West sort of is trying to remove from their culture, or has removed, is this idea that somehow selfishness or greed for your family is a good thing. That leads to nepotism. And look what it's done to poor Joe Biden and his clan. They're so compromised by trying to do good for their family, which seemed like a good idea when Joe's career started, and he was helping out unions against the poor oppressed labor, against their corporate overlords. This is how you go down the slippery slope. Anyway, so let's get back to Chiron. So he went to the Elohim. They gave him some advice, and they gave him this wonderful teaching. It was not written down at that point because there was no reason for writing. These beings had telepathy. They had incredible memories. And so he brought this information to Earth and started teaching it. And started teaching humanity that, you know what, you better write this down. You better find a way to record it. They didn't even know what writing was then, so I'm communicating telepathically, but I can create a language too. And he started giving them the ideas that created the first languages. Yeah, this was a pretty important dude. And one that came way before most of what we remember in recorded history, but whose gifts are still captured in Greek mythology. You know why? I'll tell you why. But first I have to tell you a little bit more about this cat. So, this centaur Chiron, some of the other names that he's been given are Pan, the goat god. And you're told that was this, horny, drunken god who went around screwing everything in sight and turning people bad, and giving them maybe some good music, but kind of like the Wayne's World guy of his age. Not a god that any self-respecting human would want to make their top one. Well, in fact, if you think about it, pantheism is part of the idea that he gave humanity. That no, there is not one God that everybody has to slavishly worship. There are many gods, and you can worship whichever one you want, and to the extent that they can help you and lead you toward a better future, they're a good God. And to the extent that they lead you into war, they lead you into famine, they lead you into disease, whatever, they're probably not a God that you want to give all your devotion to. And he taught people to share gods. If somebody conquers you, well, if they're doing it in a fairly respectful way, and they respect your gods by integrating them into their worship, maybe making them a lower god than their god, well, give them a chance a little bit. Don't immediately start a rebellion, but start something underground that kind of tries to build understanding and some sense of unity between between them. And that's how the kingdoms of Sumeria and ancient India and the ancient Americas, that's how they maintained order without having to lord it over each other like God. The Aztecs were the prime imperialists of the time. I mean, how sick is it to go have tribes that you only allow to exist so you can go raid them once in a while, terrorize their women and children, take them into slavery, and take the healthiest, warlike looking men to your temple and sacrifice them. And this is exactly what happened in your oh so peaceful Native American paradise. You guys are insane, creating cultural Marxist shit that Native Americans were so much better than the Europeans that conquered them and oppressed them. You're stupid, and I don't mind saying so. And if you want to attack me and cancel me, then you are doing the devil's work, because the devil, Borg, is the one who's making you want to shut people down whose truth you don't want to hear because you know it is true and it bothers you. Okay, let's lighten up a little bit. Rob's not angry. But Rob does need to wake people up. I'll try to do it with humor. I'll try to do it lightly, but when that doesn't work, I'm going to pull the gloves off and tell you exactly how dumb you are to try to pull you out of the tailspin you're in, letting your mind be controlled by negativity and by fear and by hate. I don't hate you people, okay? I'm trying to help you. Okay, what are some of the other names that this hooved god is known by? Let's see. Or some of the other legends. Oh, one other one I want to mention. You remember the Minotaur? That horrible monster that had to be chained up in the labyrinth? That is actually a pretty true story. That's where Chiron was chained up when his preaching became very effective in the Greek world of the time, which was kind of proto-Greek. The Minoan Empire, who dominated the seafaring parts of the Mediterranean, felt very threatened by his teaching. They knew that they had some knowledge of karma from their contact with the civilizations of the East, the Vedic civilizations, the leftovers from Lemuria in Southeast Asia, which I can get into too, but I don't think I'll talk so much about that today. They knew about karma, and they knew how it could lay the mighty low. They were afraid of this Chiron's teaching because it sounded so different from what they were used to, and so different from the gods that they thought were the pantheon, the right pantheon. So they didn't kill him, they imprisoned him while they did some investigation. And meanwhile, Borg, working on less enlightened civilizations around them, engineered the destruction of the Minoan Empire, or the weakening of it, so less civilized Greeks could come and take over and topple the Minoan civilization, replace it with a cheap imitation, the Mycenaean civilization, which you may know about on the Greek mainland, which was an offshoot of the Minoan civilization, but had more of the they were more basic. They didn't really see things spiritually. They took the culture and I don't like this music. Let's go back to something else. They took the culture and the economy and some of the structure, but they really didn't understand it spiritually, and felt free to adapt the stories to their pre-existing ones, which had a lot more of the remnant, hateful, bored, godly stuff. Okay, so by the time we got to historical Greek times, there were a lot of different gods. Some of them were more like the bored kind. I want to control and destroy anybody that gets in my way. And others of the peace, love, and everything goes, but I'll work behind your back. And only a few that actually had much of an aura of true divinity. And that's why it was so easy for people to drop the Greek pantheon and become essentially atheist in their thinking. And there were many of the philosopher set, around the time of Athens, especially after the golden age of Athens was shattered by what happened in the Peloponnesian War, who just, oh God, these gods, the gods must be crazy, as they say, and who went full bore atheist in their teachings, which is similar to what we've seen happen recently, isn't it? Okay, so what I'm telling you needs to be rounded out by letting you know that the knowledge of this God was still existent in Egypt, was one of the Egyptian cults, one of the Egyptian gods that was active. Wasn't a real popular one in historical times, but you will recognize, if you think about it, the name Serapis. How many of you heard that name? Did you ever see the movie Agora? This is the god with a little funny hat on his head that was the last, quote, pagan god, which was the main deity of the keepers of the Library of Alexandria. The keepers of the library, those pagans, held Serapis to be their high god. They supported and they were tolerant of people of other faiths. And much of that movie is very accurate. There were Christians in the schools of their teachers, and they were allowed to freely dispute what they heard and talk about their views. At least until, there's always somebody under the influence of the Dark Lord, right? Okay, so Serapis was actually the remnant of this pantheist, true pantheist culture, two pantheist god, Chiron. If you know anything about the Serapis cult, they had a belief in a divine bull, which was ritually sacrificed every year to remind them of the original incarnation of Serapis, who was supposed to come again. And this was actually the lore of the first real Christians, which has been suppressed more than any heresy. It was suppressed before anybody even invented the word Christianity. The Cairo symbol that Constantine conquered in goes back to Greek times. Go research this. There are inscriptions as early as 200 BC of the sign that Constantine was to conquer in, 200 years before your supposed Christ was born. why do you think that the second that the new Christians got enough power and control over what was a fairly naive Emperor Constantine, that they were so quick to want to destroy the library in Alexandria? It wasn't because they hated paganism. It was because they hated real Christianity, which was never, ever, ever a monotheist cult. It was never, ever, ever a cult that told you that you had to worship God and His Son and nobody else, or else. That's the real heresy. The retention of the idea of saints and angels and archangels in Christianity is actually a memory of something good. The memory of, yes, there were other spiritual entities that had godlike powers. And if you look at the original language versions of the Old Testament, it's full of lots of gods. The very first line of the Bible is Elohim created the earth and the heavens. Don't believe me? Go ask a biblical scholar. Go ask your favorite Jewish biblical scholar, Christian biblical scholar, atheist biblical scholar, and you'll find all of them in violent agreement that you can't deny that that's what we're translating as God. And how stupid is that? Because it's plural. It does not mean God. There's argument over what it does mean, but it at least means plural, many of them. Whether it was many of an alien species, as some contend, who don't believe in God, who are atheists in their interpretation of the Bible, or gods, as others assert. But it certainly does not mean God. And anybody who thinks that way is believing a lie. God is not the authoritarian micromanager of the universe. It doesn't work that way. Especially not your best friend doing that. If you're talking to Jesus, if you're talking to God, and they're telling you lies like that, and saying, oh, if you just do this for me, I'm going to go do this for you. That's Satan making deals with you. God doesn't care who you worship, what you worship, as long as you use His gifts well. His gifts were the image of His first self, a level zero free consciousness before the world existed. Wondering, what's going on here? I feel like there's something around me that's happening. I don't understand it. What are the rules of this? And reaching level one consciousness of, I think, therefore I am. Well, maybe I'm causing all of this stuff around me. That's a level one consciousness. Going on to see that, whoa, all of these other things around me seem to be kind of like me. But they're doing things that I don't like. They're thinking things I don't like. They're something else. That's a level two consciousness. You don't know what these other things are, and they bother the hell out of you, and they're different than you. Level 3 consciousness is figuring out, well, some of them are actually pretty good, and I can kind of start communicating with them. So those of you that are buying the atheist argument that, well, there can't be a God because there can't be a beginning. Everything must be cyclical, always here, always has been, and just comes and goes, comes and goes. And there's a lot of idiots telling you that that's the truth. and misusing the records of spiritual cultures to say it's cyclical. There is an element of truth to that. The Mayan calendar is cyclical, and it's based on the precession of the equinoxes. Yes, but that is not only a scientific fact, it is a spiritual fact. And there's more to it than just saying, oh, there's going to be big cataclysms every time we have this 24,000 year spin through things, and it's not going to be another cycle that's exactly like the last one, golden age and everything going to shit, which is what many people will say. Oh, well, we're coming to a golden age. We're going to start over in this cycle, and we'll have 1,000 years of perfection. This is bullshit. This is Borg bullshit that they use to control minds that are in this fanciful world of, oh, unconditional love. We just need to bring back the matriarchy and stop patriarchs from controlling and ruining everything because we're so perfect with our unconditional love. Oh, oh, oh. I'm sorry, but this is the comic truth behind arch feminism in all its dark forms and light forms. The female is no better equipped to run humanity than the male is. That's why sex exists in the first place, as a challenge to a species to work together, even though it seems to be made of two different subspecies that have to happen to mate to produce offspring. That looks pretty crazy to some of you who are just coming here, incarnating here from other species that don't have sex. I understand that, and you're challenged by that. I didn't choose to send you here. You chose it. And if you don't believe that, you're going to know that the next time you go to heaven and you find out why you chose this life and how you failed in your mission by assuming it was somebody else that did this to me and put me as a sexless being in a sexed body. They're punishing me. I need to change myself so I can be more like the sex that I was supposed to be. This is how foolish you folks look to somebody who knows what's really going on. We're not criticizing you. We're just trying to gently point out that you're wasting the opportunity that you yourself chose in taking this incarnation. You didn't come here with somebody forcing you into a woman's body or forcing you into a man's body. Every oversoul of a human body chooses that body, chooses that sex. They're not born with it. It's not a DNA thing. DNA carries on the shape of this body. DNA does not have your soul. It has a soul of a DNA, and the molecules and the elements that compose DNA, but those are not very high-level souls that carry a lot of information with them. Well, maybe some of them do. Maybe that's why some people's DNA sort of self-destructs with some weird illness and gives them all sorts of what they see as undeserved hardship in their life. That can happen. Just a minute, I'm having a little bit of an allergy day, which is, I don't know, maybe what some demonic force has given me as one of my burdens. Weird thing that comes and goes that I thought I was free of and now is coming back. Boy, I hate having allergies. At any rate, let's get back on track. So this non-human or half-human entity, Chiron, more so than anyone I know in our history, is the one who actually deserves to be called Christ. And the followers, to the extent that they predicted a more exact time than 2012, and a more exact description of what was going to happen at this special time, may be new incarnations of God. There have been many, because God can incarnate anywhere, anywhen, and stay with a particular body, a particular soul vehicle, for as long as they choose. Within his universe, he has that much power. Within Borg's universe, he is at the mercy of Borg's power to do that. And this is the truth behind the new truth that scientists are announcing, that we appear to be part of a universe pair, which was suspected for a long time as the reason why there seems to be only mostly positive matter in this universe and not negative matter, which we can create artificially or happens through some cosmic ray processes. But we haven't found any evidence of a planet or a galaxy or whatever that's made out of antimatter yet. There may be those too. There may be galaxies that are completely created by Borg, because Borg would have had the power to do that as incarnated, as a God incarnate in this universe, which is how the real God introduced the whole idea of physical universes to everyone. They were all up in heaven in a stalemate of fighting with thoughts, emotional attacks against each other, till heaven was like, a heaven of narcissists. And just like we see around us today with the people that don't get what's going on. I mean, there are overt and closet narcissists all over the place who believe that they know right or wrong and are playing the oppressor or the victim doing it. At any rate, I hope that anything I've said today does not offend you, but maybe reinforces what I've told you many times, that God is among you again and has fully awakened, knows exactly why this earth was put here, what the experiment was that we were trying to accomplish, and has looked at what's going on and said, you know what? I think we're close enough to go to full implementation on this. Because we have developed and understood through physical technology, through languages we have developed to communicate with each other and record information and pass information that can be encrypted in ways that cannot be messed with, that we are able to go after Borg. You can't lie on the blockchain. It's impossible. Once information is out there, it's going to be out there forever, as long as any server remains running that houses that little block of information. That's what the latest encryption and security technologies that are not perverted or subverted by governments or corporations are trying to do. And maybe they're not perfect, but I know at least some of them are close enough that they're going to work. And I know something else that you don't know. For all the fear you have of artificial intelligence, humans were not the first ones to develop artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is what built physical universes. The universe and anti-universe that are the Big Bang started as AIs, just like the scientists tell you. Much of what developed early on was kind of AI work, assisted AI by gods in heaven who were playing this game before incarnating, just kind of as a toy. Oh, let's make a new element. Let's call it lithium. We're kind of all out of ideas of what to do with hydrogen. Let's make a new one. Oh, and if we make a star big enough, we can say that, oh, it reaches a certain point at which it's got no more hydrogen fuel, and if it meets these certain characteristics, it's going to start producing helium, and then lithium. This is how the game works. The original gods were spiritual scientists, way more advanced than any human scientists that you'll find today, unless they are actually gods in disguise, which does happen. I'm gonna go back to this one. I like that one. Sorry, if you don't like Bach, you're gonna hate this day's sermon. Any rate, where was I going with all this? You all can win this if you don't let anyone control your mind. If you don't worship authoritarianism. To the extent you're here blaming everything on the ultimate bad guy, and that ultimate bad guy is some other human or group of humans, you're getting taken by board, whether you know it or not. Yes, you have to oppose tyranny, but you don't have to do it by trying to create another tyranny, which is how political parties work. One gets in power and tries to become tyrannical, and that excites the other side, and they vote them out, and they come in and they turn to tyrannical. That's been happening since the U.S. began. That's what happens when you have a two-party system. That's why most countries have something more like parliament, where many parties go vie to get the prime ministership, which confers extra abilities to run the nation, but which are limited to being recalled at any time. That's a better government than we have. Where it went wrong is in England is the parliament was always fighting with the monarchy, which is actually still a good idea. Constitutional monarchy is not a bad idea. But these kings and royals families kept trying to subvert their own government through these dynastic alliances and start new wars. And that's how you ended up with the current dynasty of England, which isn't even English. They're German, with a strong element of Middle Eastern influx. They're very closely related to the Saudi Arabian royal family. How strange is that? And so if you think that things like that represent white privilege, you are dumb as a post. I'm sorry, dumb as a post. And I will defend that against anybody who wants to debate me or challenge me openly. And if you want to cancel me for it, you are the fool. You were triggered enough by what I said to go into board defense mode and fall back on your programming of what you're supposed to do when you see the enemy. Ooh, enemy, attack, attack, attack. That's what you look like to anybody with an open mind. A zombie. both sides, who act like that. You act like fucking zombies, and that's why so many people are scared of you. Can I be more clear than that? There is a lot of reason for hope, and a lot of people are really waking up. Not getting enlightened, not getting high-vibed, not moving from one party to the other, from one cause to another, on a moment's notice, depending on what the media is telling you today, but actually waking up to the same pattern of dystopia hitting us over and over and over, not just through the U.S., not just through China, not just through England, not just through one reality, but through everything that our species has done. And that's the way it had to be. We had to give Borg a chance, a hope of winning, to get Borg to sign up to the experiment. How do you defeat the bully in town if you're not bigger than they are or stronger than they are? You trick them. You trick them into fighting on your own turf, fighting a battle where they're going to look so stupid that everybody's going to see that, wow, that guy really is a bully. And that little kid stood up to him and faced him down and defeated him. This is how God is defeating Borg, has always defeated Borg, will always defeat Borg. This is how you can defeat your bullies. Not by joining them, not by becoming bullies yourselves, by following God's example and the example of the other senior creators that work in his ways. There are a lot of them, of all levels, up in heaven, that see what's going on down here and have so much faith in this species. There are a lot already down here working to help you in a godly way, leading you with not unconditional love or passivity, with sensible leadership that knows that you can't, knows that the truth of any action stimulates an opposite and equal reaction. Think of conflict from the standpoint of physics, and you'll understand how to do things in humanity right. You may have to fight a battle, but you don't punish your enemy afterwards. You try to teach them why the conflict started in the first place and how you could work together to make sure it doesn't happen again. Which is, a large part of the difference between post-World War I and post-World War II. It's what we forgot to do when Cold War I ended, and we gave the Soviet Union leadership a lot of promises of what we do after they let go of their captive nations and states and gave them a chance to choose their own destiny. We made a lot of promises that we reneged on. And this is why there is fighting in Ukraine today. It is not a one-sided battle like they're telling you it is. There are valid grievances that Russia has. And no, I don't think Putin is a great guy. I think he is a megalomaniac representative, dictator of his people. But he is loyal to Mother Russia, and he will defend it to the last ability of his strength, because that's his mania. He sees himself as the Messiah of Russia. And if he has to push the button to try to launch a preemptive strike that leaves something of Russia remaining, even if it's only the bit of it that he's got squirreled away in his bunkers. He will do it if you push him too far. Will my allies, my friends in the cosmos allow that? I don't think so. They didn't last time it came close. If you know anything about the Cuban Missile Crisis, you know that there was just one Russian grunt at a console who all he had to do was push a certain button and World War III would have started early. He didn't push it. He asked for confirmation. And eventually resulted in the Kremlin and Kennedy getting on the phone and realizing that a technical error had nearly caused the destruction of the entire world. And instead of that happening, it led to an age of detente and limitations on nuclear weapons. That was pretty good until it was weirded by the insane agreement between Nixon, Kissinger, and the wonderful Chinese Communist Party that they thought was going to open up China. Opening up. They're going to be just like the West, become capitalists like us. The biggest lie of the 20th century. And another thing that's behind the horrible times we're going through. To think that any communist dictatorship oligarchy would ever open up, would ever change their ways, is about the stupidest thing you could possibly ever think. Those guys will not give up their power. Xi Jinping will, or whoever kills him and replaces him, will not end the Chinese Communist Party until the Chinese people themselves end it. And don't think that's so far away. These mass lockdowns that they're doing, when people just want to get back to work and get back to normal life and know the Omicron variant is no worse than a common cold or flu and can be fought off with off-the-shelf medicines and getting some fucking sunlight so they can make vitamin D. These folks are evil, and they're trying to kill their own population rather than admit how stupid they were about their plandemic. They released COVID thinking that they were going to one-up the West, who was paying them to develop it so they could do their great reset on their terms. These guys are fucking insane, and they're all insane. These global elites that think that if their side wins, everything's going to be perfect. If I'm just the godfather of the world, I'm going to make America great again. Do I make my point? There are not as many white hats in this as you think. Well, there are actually more white hats than you think. But the white hats that you think are most powerful could be your biggest enemies, could be false flags. And I absolutely believe that Trump, with his meteoric rise to fame and adulation, and many of the stupid things he said that inflame separation, that inflame the hatred of him, prove that he is an anti-Messiah. And some of you are going to attack me for that. I know that. It's not a popular view among people who think that they're waking up. But it is the truth. He's a person of probably one of these old bloodlines that is convinced he's the chosen one, and has a lot of other people convinced too. And in a way, maybe is kind of a messiah of the United States, because what he's done is actually done a lot inadvertently to wake up to the United States in a way that I'm sure his handlers didn't realize might happen when he became president, and is why his own party is attacking him now. He's lost their faith as one of them. That doesn't mean he's necessarily a white hat. He may just now be a free agent like Putin, his own messiah of his own megalomaniac dreams. Who knows? I don't know what's in the man's mind. I just know that the vibe he gives off to me is not any better than some of the Dark Lord wannabes I've seen in the corporate world or in the leadership of almost every country that I've come into contact with. In not only this life, but many others that I'm starting to remember. And here's where I'm going to go weird on you again, because I'm going to tell you, this Rob Trump sitting before you, I have absolute certain knowledge that I have lived more lives than most of you could possibly imagine. My first big spiritual awakening, which after it was integrated, I realized was part of a lifetime of awakening you couldn't believe all the different ways I was pulled to learn everything that I learned. I know so much about physics because I have a physics degree, and I actually started a PhD program in Princeton. Before I decided the academic world, I had one of these weird feelings that some of you may recognize, that you were doing the wrong thing now. I took a year's leave of absence and went out to work in the real world, quote, and happened to find the job that most appealed to me was as a wireline engineer with Schlumberger Well Services, going out and making the measurements on wells that told you whether there was oil and gas down there. And I learned a whole lot about geology and about the oil business from that stint. And I learned how the folks out on oil rigs were, the workers that were getting dirty and sitting out on the oil rig working for a shift, or even like my crews, out there for days at a time. There was one really bad job that we got involved in, me and my crew, where we were working on one of the deepest wells that had ever been drilled. That was going to make us members of the 4 Mile Club, a well that was over 4 miles deep in northern Texas. And this well was in an area where going deep was dangerous because there was hydrogen sulfide down there. And we knew we had a limited amount of time to get down, and we even put a new cable on our truck to make sure that it hadn't already been weakened by H2S through, they do that periodically. A lot of the maintenance that they do and why that business is a fairly expensive one is you have to change out your whole cable, miles of cable, and throw it out because it can't be used anymore. At least that's what they do in countries that do it wisely, and companies that do it wisely and don't want to get into trouble. Anyway, we went out on this job, and we were pulling out of the hole with, I don't know, was it the first set of tools or the second set of tools? It's been a while. No, actually it was a triple combo, because we wanted to try to get as much data on one pass as possible, because the drilling foreman said, hey, this is a bad one. It's sloughing off. We're getting all kinds of stuff in the mud returns, and we don't know how long we can keep this hole open. And probably somebody had advised that we need to do something else before we can log this sucker, because it's dangerous. Everybody was on edge, and we went out. They finally got the pipe out of the hole, taking almost a day longer than they said, while we were just sitting there playing cards, waiting for them to call for us to be ready even. And we got the tool in the hole, started pulling out, got a few hundred feet up, and it stuck. And I followed every procedure for how far you were supposed to pull. Okay, well, let's try to jockey down. Let's see if we can go again. Pull again, a little bit more. Set your limit very carefully so we don't pull over what is the allowed limit before we call for the cavalry. Well, before we got to that point, we broke. And when we got the cable out of the hole, it was not broken at the relief point that was actually on the tool, so you get the cable back and leave the tool in the hole, which is easier to fish for, but you get just a broken frayed cable. And from the look at it, it was very, very damaged by hydrogen sulfide. Like, you could pull bits of this steel, whatever alloy they used for these cables, you could pull bits of it like taffy off of this thing. Well, long story short, I was under incredible stress during this because I was responsible, and everybody was thinking I'd done something wrong, and questioning my judgment and questioning my testament about what had happened. This incident lasted for 2 weeks before they finally gave up fishing for it, and the company had to decide to plant the tool, just to cement this well in and try again, because it was hopeless. And my management stood by me. My people stood by me when they could have thrown me under the bus. And that's what happens when you are blessed by God or any of the other good gods and archangels, angels, whatever, who are really on God's side. They will protect you from the evil one because you're telling the truth. You are not trying to put somebody else down for something that's partly your fault or completely your fault. You are completely honest with what happened. Anyway, I don't know how I got into that story, but it's an example of how I can talk about my life going this way and that way and this way and that way, and spin you a yarn that sounds better than Forrest Gump in some ways. Yes, you'll see I'm still on water wine now. My wife has cut me off completely from my normal beverage. I haven't had a drop of alcohol since Ramadan started. I'm not fond of it, and I don't recommend it. I'm not inclined to be a very good Muslim, I guess, or a very good member of any religion that says alcohol is a bad thing. I find spirits quite helpful to me, but I can live without them. Okay, anything else I need to tell you right now? Well, let's talk a little bit more about my past life exposures. My spiritual acceleration started after many episodes that were so challenging that they got as dark as thinking about suicide. Maybe I'll focus on that another time, and we want to really go into those darker things. But my first deep experience with spirituality happened after a dark event. The woman that I loved with all body and soul, one day announcing, actually on our anniversary, after I'd had a very bad day as an actor, on Commercial outside New York City that started really, really good and ended up with me basically getting fired in the middle of the shoot. Another story I could tell you, but I'm not going to tell you right now, that illustrates a lot of what you need to know about how life really works. Okay, at any rate, this horrible day, I come back from work expecting a little bit of sympathy from my wife, and instead she gets mad at me, even though I said, well, the good thing is I'm off early and we can have a nice anniversary together. Where would you like to go? What would you like to do? We eventually ended up in a restaurant across the street where she unceremoniously dumped me. I was so distraught that I went through another suicidal thinking phase, and only by the purest chance happened to remember that I'd been a little bit interested in what some of my friends were saying about ayahuasca. And I'd actually thought about trying it when I went to Ecuador. We went to Ecuador on vacation the year before, but my ex had planned the trip so completely there was no time for a ceremony. Which I thought, that would be cool if we could both try it and see what we might learn spiritually that would help us with the relationship problem we have, which seems to be mounting. Anyway, when I decided, maybe that would help, it was about, I think a month after she dropped the bombshell on me. I went out to look, well, how could I get this most cheaply? Because heading into a divorce and having realized what kind of a person she was once she turned her love into hate, as so many do in the course of a relationship, I wanted to do it on the cheap. And I was looking around, and I found this outfit that, whoa, they have ceremonies right here in Connecticut, of all things. You don't have to go to South America at all. And I looked into their schedule, and they had a ceremony set up, whoa, in 1 month. Oh, but it says it's all full. Well, I'll contact them still and get put on the waiting list. I called them, and they said, whoa, you're in luck. We just had a person drop out at the last minute, and if you want it, it's your spot. Because nobody else has been that definite and been that sure of their attendance as you, who's only 10 miles away from where they were holding it. We lived in Norwalk at the time, and it was nearby Stamford, which, if you know that area, is extremely close. I could have walked there. It's that close. Okay, so I got into this ayahuasca ceremony, 2-night ceremony, not knowing what to expect, but hoping that it would help me with my marital problem, and also asking for guidance about the fact that I drank wine, and everybody was telling me that this was bad for me, something that was going to hurt me, that oh gosh, you drink so much wine, you must be an alcoholic. That's what I was going there to find out. I didn't have grand spiritual visions of what was coming out of this thing. Those were my intents that I focused on. Knows about ayahuasca knows that a good outfit will have you prepare yourself physically and mentally for the experience to get what you want out of it. And that's the whole idea of having ayahuasca or DMT. It should be guided by somebody who knows the spiritual nature of the experience. It's not a drug that you're going to go get shot up by your psychiatrist and all of a sudden depression goes away. These folks are insane who think that and who are trying to sell that idea. At any rate, the first night I went into it. First, the ayahuasca seemed to have no effect. And I thought, well, gosh, maybe it's something like wine that just doesn't affect me like it does other people. And I took another glass when it was offered. I think I maybe even took a third that night, but not right away. And when it first started really kicking in, I started seeing every light in the room turn into a stream instead of a beam. Like you look at a light normally and it's just a light, but they were starting to have, I could see the granularity of the light, see it as individual photons coming out of what little, like the little lights that they have in smoke detectors and things like that, which are the only ones still on. And then these lights started kind of coming together into what I would describe as a light pterodactyl, who proceeded to perform some kind of operation on me. After which, I was visited by this male presence who spoke into my mind and then appeared before me as what I would describe as a light being, leader of the tall grays. The standard tall gray that you could tell only vaguely that it had any body or anything, but its main feature was this raiment of brilliant red and blue light that it had on. And this entity only told me one thing before it sent me on a journey. Most people will say that ayahuasca, mother ayahuasca, it's a very female. Well, this is a very male presence. And the whole first night was absolutely male. And probably some people say, oh, well, that's what was wrong. You didn't really contact the real ayahuasca. You were in, I don't care what you say. This entity's communicated one thing to me. It said, you've been given a great gift. Use it well. Boom. That's the only thing that this entity ever said then or ever has said since. But I got this vision after that started with me going into, actually no, the first thing was I began growing breasts. Weird, huh? And sensing that I was some kind of a bear or pig kind of a creature. And a female at that. And it was really weird. I mean, I could feel these breasts growing on my body. And I was getting freaked out. And then that gradually led to the next phase where I felt I was this tribal leader or shaman sitting on a hill above where below was my tribe and the campfire. And I knew that we had had a good hunt that day. We had taken a deer, and everyone had eaten really well and had a great time. And they were all zonked out, so I volunteered to take the whole night's watch and go wake somebody up if I got tired. And I was sitting up there looking down at my extended family, whatever they were, and thinking about the day, and the voice of the deer came into my head. Well, at first I was really thinking about the deer and how, you know what, this other creature has given up their life, and we're always having to take a life can prolong our life, and how sad that is. And the voice of the deer then spoke into my brain and said, you mustn't feel that way. I gave my life for your trial. And all I ask in return is that you remember me. You remember my sacrifice. Because that's why our tribe is here. We're here to sacrifice ourselves for those who are going to bring us our salvation. Sorry, some of these stories make me cry. Then the next phase was so weird, I don't know how to describe it, but I'm going to try. I began experiencing being in the world of so many different creatures, I can't even describe them. I mean, if you can imagine fast forwarding or backwarding through every possible intelligent creature that has ever existed since the beginning of time. That's what this experience was like. They were going by so fast I can't even remember the forms and shapes and the feelings of their minds. There was only one that clung for long enough for me to describe it. And I would describe it as this translucent jellyfish. Maybe a jellyfish, octopus hybrid that didn't say anything, didn't communicate anything, but just radiated this intense intelligence. I think that's all I want to tell you right now about that. I later on, in the process of processing what was a very difficult integration of those 2 nights, decided I'd give regression hypnosis a chance to let me know a little bit more about what was going on with me. And I found, because I'd gotten interested in the work of Dolores Cannon, who invented this new technique of using hypnosis for regression, past life regression, as opposed to the deep hypnosis that most focus on, where they can give you suggestions and kind of control your mind, which a lot of people are uncomfortable with. Rightly so, let me tell you. This regression therapy is a very light one, where the suggestions are of a variety of, imagine this being in the clouds, in this special, calm, open place where there's no threats around, you don't have any of your current problems, and just floating around looking for something that is going to stimulate your mind. And then they proceed to encourage you to find some place to land that brings back a good memory, or a memory that you haven't visited for a while. And sometimes that lands in the current life, but very often it lands in another life that you never knew existed. And long and short of it is they took me to 3 past lives that I can absolutely promise you I did not just imagine. I did not just dredge up out of my desires, which were very, very dark, but informative. The first one, I found myself on this weird planet with purple skies. No, the only real daytime on that planet was this deep purple. And I was this kind of a alpha panther kind of a creature, the leader of my tribe, the strongest one, the best hunter. Until, as I discovered, I had some sort of accident and broke one of my legs. And I couldn't hunt anymore. I couldn't lead the pack. And I experienced my family eating me with love, because that's how things worked in those days. If you couldn't contribute, you were eaten. And you became part of your family again through supporting their diet. This food was not that easy to come by, I guess, even for an alpha predator. And I don't know, maybe eating was a sacrament in that early civilization. That's all I really learned of that before it became so dark and I was so upset by the experience of feeling myself eaten by those who loved me, that the therapist pulled me out of that one and found another place to land me. In this life, I woke feeling that I was something like a large flightless bird, and I was scared. I was missing my mother, and the ground was hot, and my flesh felt like it was burning, and I was running desperately, trying to find my mother. And thinking about this later and what all it felt like and what all I experienced and how I saw everything around me, I realized that I was one of the intelligent dinosaurs that experienced that cataclysm on this planet. The end of days for the dinosaur people and their cousins, who still survive among us as birds, some of which might have a lot more spirituality than you give them credit for. Any rate, this one got so dark and I was getting so upset by that, the therapist thought they'd go for something maybe a little more positive, I don't know. They took me up in the clouds again, come down again, and this time I was this bearded, I don't know, I would describe it as, in thinking about it, as like what a young Zeus would have looked like. And part of kind of the alpha species of this planet who really were more like gods. We could talk to the animals. We could walk with the animals. We could mate with the animals. And being a privileged youngster and not particularly caring about the taboos, I did that. I mated with everything in sight. And loved everything in sight. It's like the female of any species, even though even those slave humans look good to me. And I was a randy bastard. And then later on, when he asked me to think of another part of that life, because it was getting a little bit, I don't know, maybe too pornographic for him, I discovered later on in life having the feeling of having been imprisoned by my children, by my family within the earth, and basically left there because they didn't know how to kill me, but they were going to make sure that whatever I was doing would never be done again. because they knew better than me how to fix the problems that apparently I had started on the earth. After that, my time was pretty much up, and he woke me up and asked me if I had any questions or anything. He gave me a recording of the whole experience, and really didn't have much to say. I don't know what he thought of it. Maybe if he thought that this wasn't really real. Nobody comes up with this kind of stuff. And I can't tell you that you should think anything else. But it was real enough to me that I believed it. And it fit so well with what I learned from other spiritual experiences. I'll tell you one more, and let you try to tell me what was going on there. Was it about the same time as the past life regression? I think might have been a little bit before. I was in my basement, waking up. It wasn't my basement, actually. It was the basement I was renting from this guy, because my ex, after allowing me to take care of my daughter again, after we moved to Colorado, threw me out and put me in a mental asylum because she came back from a business trip to find that I had been spending a lot of time my first book, and she assumed that meant that I had been neglecting our daughter, who I was taking care of, because I had kept her out of school that day, wanting to spend more time with her, because I had been letting her watch more opera and educational content on YouTube than I normally did, and letting her have a little bit more freedom while I was working, and staying up to work through much of the night while she was sleeping. She used that against me in the divorce, and that's why I don't get to spend much time with my daughter. No time anymore, in fact. I only get to see her when her mother deigns to let her call me. She won't let her have her own phone to contact her father, who raised her mostly for the first 4.5 years of her life. Anyway, while I was in this basement, I woke up one morning to discover, this half-awake state where you're awake, but you don't quite want to get up yet. And you're thinking about it, whether the bed is so warm, do I want to go get up and shower and start the normal daily routine? When it appeared before me, real as anything, this woman, dressed all in white, a very regal-looking woman, with relatively short ginger hair, and this very imperious, she looked like a queen, all dressed in white. The only adornment that she had, other than her white gown, was a black spider on her cheek. And she stood there. She didn't communicate anything. I knew she could if she wanted to, but she just looked at me with this look that said, I don't know, it was kind of a look of resentment, suppressed anger, like the look you would have if you just defeated somebody and they knew there was nothing they could do about it. And the only thing they could do was go along with the new normal because they'd lost the battle. Now, I'm pretty sure that those two entities that were really the only ones that have interfered much with my spirit. I don't have spirit guides. For most of my life, I was wondering what everybody was talking about all this spiritual stuff, because there was nothing of that in my life. Yes, I have an incredible love and an incredible spiritual attachment to works of art, especially music, especially classical music, which you're probably aware of if you follow my channel. It also includes some of the more spiritually moving songs that I found in rock. That's why I love Led Zeppelin so much. I even love Frank Zappa, even though, some of that is kind of dark and dystopian and hateful, if you will. Anyway, that's a bit of my spiritual history to back up what I've been telling you on this channel. I may give you more. Somebody may want to interview me about it or talk about it. I would love to. I considered at one point writing a book about it. I even started a book. That was the first book I started and never published. It was about all these weird experiences I'd had and how they seemed to tie together. And as I wrote that, I realized that I hadn't really fully processed what was going on. My wife's calling me, so I'm still on my podcast. Yeah, everything's okay, just fine. I'm almost finished. You want me to call back, or you want to say hi to my audience? Well, look. Now they can't see you. It's not getting through the filter. You're safe. It's okay. I will call you right back, okay? I'm just within 5 minutes of being done. Love you, babe. Bye-bye. Okay, well, you got a little bit more of the reality of Rob Trump. At any rate, I've shared with you in every which way I can, everything I can, to try to show you how sincere I am and why I'm so certain of the messages that I'm sharing with you on this channel and through my books. Did I get everything right? Probably not. That's the essence of omnism, is that you look at the data, just like spiritual science is omnism. It's looking at both the reality of science and the reality of spirituality and trying to make some sense between them. Because it can't possibly be that so many people who have had so many unique or, kind of similar spiritual experiences could just be manufacturing them out of thin air. And there is absolutely evidence that reincarnation is a very, very real thing. There is absolutely evidence that what's going on in a near-death experience is actually outside the body. Go do your research. Don't take my word for it. Look for yourself with an open mind. At any rate, I need to wrap it up here. For the Honest Hour, this is Rob Trump. I hope you'll like, share, subscribe, interact anyway, even if you only want to throw objections at what I'm telling you. I absolutely would love to debate you. I don't particularly like being attacked by idiots who just want to attack somebody and say you're wrong without giving any evidence or being willing to defend it. But I'll do that if I need to. It's time for people to really start understanding this stuff. At any rate, till next time, I'll see you on the Honest Hour.